So from the start, we know that we have the LeBron and Anthony Davis core. Now, this used to be a core that I believed in very strongly. Those of you guys who listened to me before this last season understood why, even despite everything that happened, even despite the Russell Westbrook trade, why I was so confident in that group. And the main reason why was LeBron James and Anthony Davis. If you guys remember, I said that in the previous 2 seasons, when LeBron James and Anthony Davis were actually available and on the court healthy, they won almost 80% of their games. And never were even remotely threatened in that playoff run, right? It was very similar to the playoff run that the Warriors just had. It was a dominant run to the title. And so I believed in that core so much that even with the Russell Westbrook trade and all of the negative that came with that, I was like, hey, man, if LeBron James and Anthony Davis are on the floor, they'll be fine. Here's the problem. Last year, the net rating with LeBron and Anthony Davis on the floor together was lower than it was the previous season with both of them off the floor. That's how bad they were last year. You know that 80% win percentage they had the previous couple years? They were 11-10 last year when LeBron James and Anthony Davis played. And there's a couple of reasons for that. With LeBron's obviously available here, and LeBron played like an MVP. So it's LeBron a little bit on the defensive end, letting go of the rope, not being as bought into Frank Vogel's defensive scheme as he used to be. But a huge part of it was Anthony Davis's decline. This is something I've talked about on the show a lot. Anthony Davis was a bona fide top 5 player in the league in the bubble. He was a dominant defensive force, right? Rudy Gobert-esque type of defensive force, arguably better, depending on who you ask. He was hitting post fadeaways like he was Kevin Durant, bullying mismatches, hitting game winners, and was just an all-around dominant two-way superstar. You know, LeBron James was the best player on that team. That's, to me, unassailable. However, Anthony Davis was right there. That's how good he was. He was right there with LeBron James in one of the most dominant playoff runs of his career. And he's the second best basketball player of all time, in my opinion. So that's how good Anthony Davis was. He's not that good anymore. He put on weight. He lost foot speed. As a result, his body's starting to fail him. As a result, he hasn't been on the court long enough for him to keep his rhythm. As a result, his jump shot has completely fallen apart. He was one of the worst volume jump shooters in the league last year. And so Anthony Davis is arguably not even a top 15 player anymore. I think when he's healthy now, even with all of his decline in terms of his skill, he's still right around the 14th, 15th best player in the league. But there's a case that he's even lower than that. And so that defensive lack of buy-in from LeBron plus Anthony Davis's decline amounted to the LeBron and Anthony Davis core going from being the most dominant pairing in the NBA to kind of underwhelming, you know? And so a couple of things, really easy here. The number one thing that matters for the Lakers this summer, forget about anything else I'm about to talk about. We're going to talk about Russ. I'm going to give you guys 3 potential Russell Westbrook trades. I'm going to talk about what they should do on the periphery, like different things that different moves that they should make to kind of polish off the rest of the roster. None of that even comes close to having nearly as much impact as Anthony Davis getting back to what he was in 2020. If he does that, it will completely transform the outlook for this roster. I'll give you guys an example. Jason Tatum. We think he's probably right around the 10th best player in the league, right? Well, Steph Curry was the second best player in the league, in my opinion, right behind Giannis. But arguably the best player in the league, right? That gap, look back to the NBA Finals. Think about how much that gap mattered. Think about the difference in Tatum's impact on those games and Steph Curry's impact in those games. That's the difference between the best guy in the league and the 10th best guy in the league. That's the difference. There's a reason why Steph Curry and LeBron have won 8 of the last 11 titles. There's a reason why Kawhi and Giannis have the other 3. It's because that top tier of superstars is uniquely capable of impacting basketball games in a way that no other basketball player can. So once you get past Giannis and Steph and LeBron and KD, there's a drop-off, a big one. And so Anthony Davis being in that tier, as opposed to being in the 3rd tier, down around the 15th best player in the league, that's the best way that this Lakers team can experience an influx of talent. Now, I'm not optimistic about it. He went a couple months without touching a basketball again. Then we see KD talking on Twitter. He went on with Eddie Gonzalez from the ETCs, and he tweeted about it. KD goes 2 days without touching a basketball and is so antsy that he delays the recording of a podcast to go to the gym with his trainer because he's like, I was getting anxiety because I was thinking about how all the other players in the league are getting better and I'm not. That's the difference in the way those two guys are wired. I don't think it's a coincidence that Anthony Davis shot 18% from three last year. Those two things are very closely related in my opinion. Some people disagree, but that's just the way I see the game. And so Anthony Davis, getting back to what he was, is the biggest swing factor for this Lakers team. And then secondly, getting Darvin Ham to get these guys to buy in again. Because like I talked about earlier, LeBron's not off the hook here. LeBron averaged 30, had a magical offensive season. But he declined significantly on the defensive end, and it wasn't because of his athleticism, it was because of his commitment. And so if Darvin Ham can get LeBron James and Anthony Davis bought in defensively to start this season, and Anthony Davis gets back to what he was, right away, like 80% of the Lakers' problems are fixed. Like, that simple. Even if it's Wenyen Gabriel, Austin Reeves, and Stanley Johnson alongside them, they will win a shit ton of basketball games because that's how good those two guys are when they are truly committed and healthy and dialed in on both ends of the floor. So that's why we got to keep an eye on AD. Let's talk about Russell Westbrook, though. So Mark Stein yesterday said that he guesses, if he had to guess, so this is not reporting, but if he had to guess, he guessed that Russell Westbrook would be on the roster for day one of training camp. His reasoning was the Lakers have continued to shut down any attempts to get them to take back long-term salary for Russ or to give out any assets like their 2 first-round picks that they have available, the 2027 and the 2029. They've been shutting all of that down, which I don't have to get into again, but to make a long story short, Russell Westbrook is a bad contract. You have year 20 LeBron James and Anthony Davis on the roster. If you think the 2027 and 2029 first-round picks are more valuable than trying to win a championship with the second greatest basketball player ever and one of the best power forwards ever, alive and ready to play right now, then you are punting that for the sake of two players in 2027 and 29 that have a very, very, very small chance of even getting close to as good as AD and LeBron are right now. That's how foolish that is. And if you're concerned about taking back long-term salary, hey, guess what? The Hornets were able to trade it. Let's pretend this happens. Let's say the Hornets trade Gordon Hayward in a deal for Russell Westbrook. Now the Lakers have Gordon Hayward. Well, you don't think you'd be able to trade him for a similar player like Russ in the future? A similar short-term, huge contract that someone's trying to dump? That's how this stuff works. Yes, it sucks to take on long-term salary, but you can deal with it. Yes, it sucks to trade away 2 first-round draft picks, but you also were able to get the number 35 pick this year by trading a couple of future seconds. So the point is that those are fixable problems. Draft picks, salary, those are fixable problems. What is not fixable is LeBron's getting older. What is not fixable is you have an opportunity right now with LeBron James and Anthony Davis to win a title. You have to devote yourself to that right now. So that we don't. I didn't even want to get back into that today, but it's just something that irritates me so much that I couldn't help myself. But if Mark Stein is right, and they are more concerned about protecting those draft picks and their long-term salary flexibility than committing to winning with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, that's outrageous. If that's your approach, trade LeBron. Get him out of here. There's absolutely no reason to subject him to this. You know, I'm not a huge believer in putting the priorities of a player over a franchise. You know, obviously, if you're the Lakers, you have a commitment to your own team. But why'd you get into LeBron James' business then? Why'd you get into this business if this wasn't your ultimate goal, to win the trophy? And I've always thought that's so funny. Well, what about this 2027 draft, first-round draft pick? How many first-round draft picks become superstars? What's the statistical probability that one of those guys will ever be as good as LeBron James is right now? It reminds me of that Peter Griffin thing. It's like from Family Guy. It's like, well, it's a mystery box. It could even be a boat. It's like, well, the boat's right there, man. You can literally have the boat. And you're more concerned about the mystery box, which might be a boat. It's just such an ass backwards way of doing things. But so if we look at the roster, we know that we have LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and we know that we have whatever comes back for Russ. Because I'm going to, for the sake of this preview, make the assumption that Russ is gone, because I just can't even fathom why they would bring him back. To do that to Darvin Ham would be outrageous. So these are my 3 favorite Russ trades. Now, to be clear, these are optimistic Russ trades for the Lakers. So in all 3 cases, they would have to attach a first-round draft pick, and in all 3 cases, they would probably have to bet on those teams not getting better offers from elsewhere in the league. There are variations of these offers that are less advantageous for the Lakers that they might end up having to take, but just these are very glass half full, rose-colored glasses trades that the Lakers could potentially make this summer. So first, with the Charlotte Hornets, Kelly Oubre, Terry Rozier is a really good guard that I like a lot, and PJ Washington. PJ Washington's a really good player. I don't think it necessarily fits into Charlotte's long-term future, so I think that's why he could potentially be available. But he's good enough that the Lakers would absolutely have to include a first. But that trade allows you to bring back 3 quality role players, including 2 very athletic wings, to fill in some of the perimeter size deficiencies that the Lakers had in previous seasons. There's variations of that trade, right? Like you could swap in, if they wanted to keep PJ Washington, you could take back Miles Plumlee. I really think the Lakers need 1 backup center. You guys know I don't like traditional centers, but you got to have 1 on the roster for weird matchups or to eat innings in the regular season. Don't think they should be in the regular rotation, but you need them. Plumlee's a good example of one, or a guy like Dwight Howard, if you brought him back at the minimum, to be a guy who played 12 minutes a game as your backup center, and or for specific matchups against guys like Jokic or Embiid, right? So there's variations of that trade, including guys like Plumlee. Break glass in case of emergency. If they're like, no, we're giving you Gordon Hayward, you take back Gordon Hayward if you have to, because again, you're trading Russell Westbrook here. But I'd prefer to avoid Gordon Hayward because of his injury history. But that's trade option number 1. Number 2, New York Knicks. Alec Burks, Evan Fournier, and Nerlens Noel. Now, there's a couple of things here. You'd have to wait until after they finish the Jalen Brunson signing, because in this particular case, the Knicks would be taking back more money than they'd be sending out. But the big one here is they get off of long-term money from Fournier, which, if you're trying to build for the future and you see it as a Brunson, Julius Randle thing, Fournier, it doesn't really fit for you there. And you have him for 3 years left on his deal. It's a great way to generate some almost immediate flexibility going into the following season. Burks and Noel each have 2 years left on their deal. I think they're both right around, I think they combine for about $16 million, if I remember correctly. So in this case, you wait until after the Jalen Brunson signing, you get back 3 quality perimeter role players to play alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Again, there, I think they'd have to include a first-round pick. And then last but not least, the Indiana Pacers. You guys have heard this one, but Malcolm Brogdon and Buddy Hield. Again, this is betting on the Pacers wanting to rebuild. You absolutely would have to include a first here because Malcolm Brogdon is that high quality of a player. Buddy Hield is kind of a mixed bag around the league because he's such a great offensive player, but he's limited defensively, and he's had some health concerns in his career as well. But that's another 2 guy. Hield is not a great physical profile defensively on the wing, but Malcolm Brogdon is. And so you're getting back a good 2-way guard and then a good high-end offensive guard that likely would fit really well alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis. So like I said, those are rose-colored glasses types of trades. You'll probably end up having to take something a little less than that. Those are just 3 examples of good outcomes for the Lakers in a Russell Westbrook trade. And again, giving up a first-round draft pick, yes, I understand the 2027 first might be how you rebuild one day. But you also have LeBron James and Anthony Davis on the roster. You owe it to them to try to make this work. And in this case, swapping a pick 5 years in the future to bring back quality role players is an excellent trade-off for the Lakers. So then in this case, we'd have whatever package comes back, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Kendrick Nunn, Talen Horton-Tucker, all under contract. Stanley Johnson, Austin Reeves, and Wenyen Gabriel are all on team options, all for right around $2 million for the season. I expect them to take all of those. They're discounted, they're good fits, they play hard, and they bring that little influx of youth that this team needs so badly. Each of them bring specific, unique skill sets to the Lakers. We talk a lot about, the difference between positional defenders and disruptive defenders. Austin Reeves is a really good positional defender in this league already. Stanley Johnson is a really good disruptive defender already in this league. Wenyen Gabriel is just your textbook try-hard forward that you just know is going to has a nose for the ball and is going to be flying around trying to make plays. He's a capable spot-up shooter as well. Again, for the money, and understanding that they're homegrown players that the fans are attached to, I just don't think you can do much better in the veteran minimum market than those guys. So I think you retain all of those. Like we talked about earlier, no plotting centers, but you could get one who's a decent athlete to try to be a backup for you. Plumlee in a trade with a team like the Hornets, Dwight Howard, if you sign him for the minimum contract. Again, Dwight Howard, as he showed last year, when he was able to play in small bursts, when he was able to take nights off frequently, he was actually a very good backup center in the NBA. It's when you have to lean on him heavily that suddenly his decline becomes readily apparent. But most importantly, on the periphery of that, outside of those guys, let's say they need to sign 3 or 4 additional guys for the veteran minimum, you got to target athletes on the perimeter. So I mentioned these earlier for Brooklyn. I'll read a handful of examples. DeAndre Bembry, Daniel House, Josh Jackson, Justin Jackson, Wesley Matthews, Otto Porter Jr. There's a bunch of guys in this mold. There are dozens of them that I was looking at this morning. And alongside LeBron James and Anthony Davis, they would be in small roles that they should be able to excel at. And so you don't have to be picky. You can take what's available. Just don't make the mistake that Rob Pelinka made last year and target tiny players.